I'm Anna,
And I'm Fran.
and you're listening to Murder Words. Welcome back.
To Murder Words.
I was about to say it, and then you just cut in there. And
Actually, I was trying to get into the welcome back.
Oh.
I was trying to throw you off today.
You did throw me off. So, first, just a little bit of business. I can't remember if we do this in the beginning or the end, but we have a new donor, and her name is Sarah Johnson.
Sarah.
And we've been friends for probably most of our life, definitely. I think probably since middle school. But she is an angel and doing big things in DC now, so
Oh.
we love her very much. Hopefully it was okay that I said her name. So, anyway, this story that I have is going to be a two-parter. I recently had surgery, so I had a lot of time on my hands to just
So you went deep with it?
take a deep dive.
Okay.
And I heard this one, you're just cleaning and like listening to podcasts or in your case, YouTube, the YouTube videos you like. And this one just popped up and I was like, how is this even a real thing?
Really?
It started out like this guy was born in the late 1800s, which is usually not my style.
You're
That's
doing
usually
an old
more you.
one?
Yeah.
You're doing an old one today?
But it doesn't seem like it when you're telling the story.
Okay.
So I'm just going to get right into it because it is a lengthy one. Because I did so much research sitting in my zero gravity chair just. Okay. This guy's name is Carl Panzram. And he was born on a small farm in Minnesota in 1891. His parents were Johann and Matilda Panzram, and they were German immigrants.
Really grants?
In Carl's words, this is how he described them, quote, "They were hardworking, ignorant, and poor."
Okay.
Anyway, they were legit awful.
Okay.
They were terrible parents. Johann and Matilda had 8 children. I wrote 8 children on this one, but I continued to do research after I wrote all this, and I think it actually might be 6 or 7 kids. Either way, it was a lot.
Isn't it weird how documents back then, it's like they miss children or overrepresented them?
Yeah.
I see that all the time, too. They're like 5 or 6. I'm like, that's a whole entire human being.
Literally, a lot of the stuff that I researched about him was different, and I don't know if it's because it was old or so I kind of just took a bunch of stuff that was the most similar and then put it together. So hopefully this is right. There's also a documentary on him, and I rented it off of Amazon Prime, and I started it and got distracted, and then the rental ran out before I got to watch it.
Oh.
So,
It
but there
obviously-
is one on him. I didn't watch it.
It obviously wasn't good enough for you to rent it twice to finish it.
I couldn't bring myself to do it. So Carl was the youngest out of all the kids. Basically, their main goal was to have kids so they could work on their farm. Like, they were just having kids for labor. Immediately, they started working. Basically, when they started walking, it was like, you're going to get outside and work.
You can go do something.
Their farm was pretty much useless. It was a plot of land, and it didn't really, I guess the soil was just not
Like
really
bad soil.
fertile. Yeah, like they couldn't grow anything, and so they were, basically doing all this work for
Nothing.
pretty much. Or they were just trying to make it good soil. His parents were known to be really hard workers though, so that is a true statement. His childhood was awful. This is a story, I don't want to seem like I feel sorry for Carl, but I feel like it probably could have been stopped.
Okay.
I don't blame him for being angry, is what I should say. The way he handled it, obviously terrible. But you'll see what I'm talking about. He did some really horrendous things, but I've never heard of a life this terrible.
Oh, wow.
So-
Okay. We've done some doozies, too.
I know. So if he did anything wrong, or even if he did something right, but just like made a wrong face or something, he was beaten, like really badly. Around this time, that's when they passed the law saying that if you have a kid that's like 5 or up, they had to go to school.
Okay.
And Johann and Matilda were like, this is bullshit. Like, I hate that law.
You should have told me this when we were trying to conceive all these kids for labor.
Yeah. So instead of just like hiring someone else or asking for help, they expected their children to spend their nights working on the farm. So they had to go to school during the day, and now they're taking their sleep from them. So this was obviously like really affecting him mentally,
Right.
physically.
Never getting a break. How old is he here?
So he's 6 years old here. And throughout
Oh
this
my
entire
gosh.
story, he's going to be younger than it seems. Like, the things that are happening, you're going to be like, this man is like, has to be like 70 by this point, but he's literally not. He's young the whole time.
Really? I was like thinking like 12 already.
No,
So-
he's 6.
Oh.
And on average, all of the kids were getting 2 hours of sleep a night. So he was basically like a zombie at school.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone started to notice this story that I'm about to explain is super graphic, so strap in. Because he was not taking care of himself. I don't know if that's the reason. I'm just going to go with that, though. He got an ear infection. Carl's parents refused to spend money on anything medical. They were basically just like, kind of like the whole mentality of like, it's a scratch. Like, it'll be fine.
Like, deal with it,
My
yeah.
my mom is also like that, but she would obviously never do this. So, the infection went on for so long, his ear swelled up like a cauliflower ear.
Oh.
And that makes me hurt thinking about it.
It does.
It was so bad he became deaf in that ear. And he started to lose balance and like couldn't walk straight. And this pissed his parents off because he couldn't work because he was like walking on crooked. My nose is all runny. Sorry if you almost said sorry if you can hear that. Sorry if you guys can hear my nose running. So when he couldn't walk straight, they were like, okay, now we have to do something about it. So instead of going to the doctor or a medical professional, they decided to cut his ear with a knife and let the infection drain out. This is their plan.
Oh my
It gets even
God.
worse.
See, I thought you were going to say they were going to pee in it.
What? That is not what I expected you to say.
It's like an old farm thing. You pee.
I thought you peed on it if you got like a jellyfish
I thought
sting.
you peed. I mean, I guess the jellyfish, but I thought you peed in your ear if you got an ear infection. I thought they peed in it.
I'm going to throw myself down the stairs right now with that. And also look it up after this. So, Johann had all of Carl's siblings hold him down on the dining room table while he sliced at his ear with a knife.
Oh.
Carl was obviously fighting back, and while he was fighting, his dad, this makes me nauseous, accidentally stabbed him inside of his ear, like in the ear hole.
Oh, of the infected ear?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So far that it hit his brain.
Oh.
Bitch. At this point, he passed out from the pain, but when he was woken up by his parents pouring boiling water into the wound. So into his brain, pretty much. So he goes into like a rage and starts like punching people and screaming, and they thought he was going crazy, which he probably was. But some people speculate that this could have injured his frontal lobe. Like
Head
a lot of
injuries.
serial killers. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Because he basically had a lobotomy.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was like a sideways one.
Yep. And I know this is going to come as a shock to everyone, but this procedure did not work. In fact, it made it worse. So they eventually had no choice but to take Carl to the hospital, and he was there for weeks because of the infection
stab?
in his ear spread into his brain.
I wonder what that conversation was. Like, at what point they were like, okay, it's time to take him to the doctor.
Yeah. Or the doctors, like, how did he...
Did you guys just not notice?
Get this stab in his brain. Like, what is going on here?
Did you imagine him to explain that? Like, he was fighting back.
We were just trying to slice his ear open, let that infection drain out, and I just accidentally stabbed him in the brain.
And the doctor was like, well, why didn't you just be in it?
No. I cannot. So when Carl came home, the farm was in terrible shape. Not that it was thriving before, but they had to spend all of their money on this hospital stay. So they it basically went to shit after that. Most of his brothers ended up leaving to get jobs. From what I read, Carl was the only child still in the house.
Okay.
Everyone else left. After this incident, people said that they saw a huge change in Carl. He was becoming like super aggressive. Some things I read said like even that he was violent, things like that. His dad was the only person who could keep him in line just because his dad was more violent than he was.
Oh.
So he would just like beat him so bad. And one day, his dad was just like, all right, I don't want to do this anymore. See you later. And just abandoned the whole family. So he was left there alone with his mom, Matilda. And they tried to hold it together, but they had like no money, like $0. They were living way below the poverty line. Like he was starving. They didn't have like clothes. I mean, it was just really bad.
Oh.
So at 8 years old,
oh my God,
Carl became an alcoholic. Like detoxing in the mornings if he didn't have alcohol at 8 years old. We've heard some stories in our lifetime, but not once have I ever heard of an 8-year-old going through
detox.
Delirium tremens, whatever it's called, in the morning. His first drink was when he stole liquor from his dad's stash.
Okay.
And he would aimlessly walk into bars around town, and people thought this was awesome. Like, they were like, look at this little boy in here, like, drinking. So they would just give him alcohol.
Yeah.
Like, they thought it was, like, a fun time. He was then, at 8 years old, arrested for public intoxication.
You stop it.
I swear. This is his first arrest, obviously, because he's been alive for, like, 5 minutes. He gets arrested so many times after this that it's kind of hard to keep up, but... Fast forward to, I think they just gave him like a slap on the wrist. I was going to ask what they did. Yeah. At the age of 11, he was still drinking heavily, and he would wander around the neighborhood and find like things to steal. And I mean, honestly, he probably needed some of these things.
Right.
He thinks in his mind that people get things by, like, he has no idea how people get stuff. Like, no one has ever sat down and been like, you have to work hard to make money to buy stuff. Like, he just legit did not know that. So he thinks everyone steals stuff. That's how he believes.
Okay.
So one day he walks into one of his neighbor's houses and steals a cake and some apples. Probably because he's starving.
Probably.
Before he walks out, he spots a revolver. And he's like, that looks cool. And so he takes that too.
He's 11, right?
He's 11.
Yeah.
So he's walking home holding a giant cake. I don't know what size the cake was, but I imagine in my mind like a wedding. like a big, huge cake, like walking down the road with it. And he has his apples and his guns probably like hidden on him. But obviously the neighbor called the police and they got to him before he got home and he was arrested. Instead of CPS stepping in or the judicial system, like, hey, this kid is starving to death. Like,
he's stealing cake.
Like, someone help him. Yeah. They send him to the Minnesota State Reform School. And I already, by the name, you know it's anything that says reform. Mm-hmm. This, by the way, this school is still there to this day. I'm sure it's much better than this. Mm-hmm. But...
yeah, because we're talking before even, like, state certifications and things like that.
It's worse. I mean, this is, like, worse than you can even imagine. In his biography, because he did write a biography before he passed, he wrote that this was when he learned about man's inhumanity to man. because no one would help him.
Oh.
Like, he just kept getting, like, punished. So this was a Christian-ran facility that was meant to reform young boys by beating them. During Carl's intake, the director, or whatever the title is, we're going to go with director, whose name is Dr. George Mann, he brought Carl into his office, and he was like, hey, so have you ever been sodomized or sodomized anyone else? Like, these were the questions that he asked. Are you filthy? Have you ever had sex or masturbated? Are you a homosexual? And Carl was obviously like, I don't even know what you're saying because I'm 11 years old. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He then stripped Carl down naked to give him some type of exam. Then he sexually assaulted Carl to show him what being sodomized was.
Oh my God.
Even though he is telling him, like, you're filthy if you do this. Then he's pretty much like, okay, welcome, go to class. So Carl's like having the worst life ever already. This, like, he starts to not trust people, obviously. And he then learns about what they call the painting room, which is not arts and crafts.
Oh.
It's a room where they paint you black and blue from beating you.
Oh my gosh, that's awful.
Yeah. The next morning, after arriving to this institution, Carl was taken to the painting room as kind of like some initiation type of thing. Like, this is what's going to happen to you if you step out of line. And when they took him in there, they stripped him down naked, strapped him face down on a wooden bench. They put a saltwater-soaked towel on his back, and then they whipped him with a belt that Dr. George Mann had designed himself. So it was like leather and had holes in it, and when you were whipped with it, the holes would basically like suction the skin up and create blisters.
Oh.
And then like they just continued to beat them, so the blisters would bust, and at that time the salt water would get in there and like burn them. So this was like thought out,
like purposely set up
very
for torture
much thought
methods.
out. Like, he created this himself, the director.
Sadistic.
Or whatever. Immediately after he was beaten, they were like, all right, go to class and study the Bible. So Carl, I mean, and we talk about it more later, has a huge resentment against any religious type of
entity,
anything. Yeah. He started to quickly notice that Dr. George Mann enjoyed like the beating stuff. Like, he like got pleasure from all of this. It's like he went somewhere else in his mind. Like, he was like, this guy's getting pleasure from this, so I'm not going to give him what he wants. Like, I'm going to have just zero reaction when this is happening to me.
Okay.
And that sent Dr. George Mann over the edge. I don't know why I'm continuing to say his full name. Dr. George, you all know what I mean. Carl, because of this, was sent to the paint room every day. They were pissed. Like, why can't we break this kid? Like, all the other kids give in, but this one just... no emotion.
Right.
No crying, no all that. So they would have to like give up because they were so exhausted from beating him, and like they wanted him to have emotion. He wouldn't, so they had to like give up because they were exhausted. He also started to notice that Carl did that people connect pain with pleasure. And this is all he knows right now. Like, he's 11 years old at this point. So these are like his life lessons that he's learning.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, because no one even stepped in and said you need to work for, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, and at this point, not like no one has ever been like a decent human to him, ever. Not his parents, not, I don't know really much about his siblings. I do know they were all, one of them passes away, but they were all normal. Like, one was a cop.
Oh.
And stuff like that.
None of them returned home to help their...
Well,
all right.
One of them does, but yeah,
okay,
we briefly, talk about that. So the director, Dr. George, was like, I have to come up with a better beating tool. Like, I need to create something better. So he created a mechanical paddle and thought this was like a genius idea. It didn't work because, like, it wasn't a human. You know how humans can like get mad and have different, like, ranges of, like, how hard they're hitting someone.
Yes.
Like, with their anger and things like that, and in the same spot over and over. This didn't do that. It was, like, the same amount of force, and it was, like, spread out all over the body. So all the kids were getting used to it. They were like, this is so much better than them doing it. And Dr. Mann caught on to that, and in his mind, that was Carl's fault. Like, he's teaching all of the other kids to act tough, like it's not hurting them. So he decides that he is going to personally take over Carl's beatings himself. Every single day, George Mann is beating and raping Carl. So he's starting to rape him every day, too. There's a lot, like, trigger warning, there's a lot of rape, sexual assault, all, like, in this story. It's a lot. They also had to work while they were at the reform school, like hard labor. Carl was placed in the kitchen, which put him in charge of making the food for everyone. He said that any liquid that came his way, he would urinate in it. Then he would ejaculate in the food.
Oh my God.
And then sit next to the guards and watch them while they ate it. Which,
Yeah.
don't blame him.
Don't blame him
honestly.
either.
One evening, Dr. Mann decided that he was going to eat with the guards too. This wasn't like normally a thing. I guess he just wasn't really there in the evenings. I don't know. Carl saw that and put rat poison in his food.
Okay.
This was the first time Carl wanted to, like, actually murder someone.
Mm-hmm.
He got caught before it happened.
All those other times he didn't get caught, and then that's the time he gets caught?
I know. I don't know if he just, like, left it. I don't know what happened, but he did get caught. He was taken out of the kitchen and severely punished. He started to realize, and this was like a common theme for the rest of his life, that if you are bigger and tougher than someone else, like, it is your job to pick on them is not even like the term to use, but like torture them pretty much. So, because that's what was happening to him his entire life. All the older boys, all the men, like, they always
Like there's a hierarchy to
tortured
it.
him. Yeah, so he thought in his mind, like, he needed to start doing this, and then he'll
Be bigger than them.
Yeah. So he started to prey upon the younger boys, and he started to beat and rape them on a regular basis. He would get caught and be punished, but of course Carl had no reaction. So at this point, instead of, like, giving up on the beatings, they just, like, started to take shifts and, like, hours of beating. And then they were like, we're going to start keeping him awake so he becomes sleep deprived. Little did they know, Carl was a champion of no sleep because his parents did that to him. So they were like, you're going to be on cleaning duty overnight. And he quickly realized that the cleaning supplies were flammable. So he was like, you know what? I'm burning this paint room down.
Okay.
So he did.
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't prove that it was him. I mean, they knew, but, like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what evidence you looked for back in those days, but they couldn't prove it was him. They couldn't bring in investigators because they didn't want anyone, like, in the outside world, to know what was going on
Right.
inside of the facility. So basically, it just happened, and all the boys saw Carl as a hero. Like, he got rid of this room where we all got tortured. The older boys were like, started to kind of like him, and they were like, listen, we're going to tell you how to get out. Like, we're going to show you how to manipulate so you can get out of here. They were like, you need to say and do what they want. Like, even if you don't believe it, you need to make it seem like you do, and you'll get out on parole for good behavior. Like, show them that you're reformed.
Right.
And all of a sudden, he's like the best student ever. Like, like, memorizing the Bible and, like, praying and all that. The guards and Dr. George were like, dude, it worked. Like, we reformed him.
We finally beat him,
like,
to
all
submission.
of this raping reformed him to be a good Christian boy. Within a month, he was paroled.
Really?
Within a month. And at this point, he's 13.
So he was there about 2 years.
And he was paroled to his mom's house. His mom, like at this point in her life, she's super sick and bedridden. The farm is like just in worse shambles than it's ever been. All the animals are like skeletons, starving to death. It's just not, it's not a good scene. Mm-hmm. And apparently before Carl was paroled, one of his siblings did try to come help their mom, but he drowned in a pond. So that's the only time that I found that one of the siblings came back.
Like, on the farm?
I guess.
He drowned on the...
Yeah, dude.
Man.
He just
nothing is working out for him.
Oh, dude, it just continues to get worse. But Carl was happy that the farm was in chains. Like, he was happy to see that it was falling apart. Mm-hmm. And his goal was to ruin the remaining good parts of the farm. Like, he started to sell off of the animals that were still alive. Mm-hmm. And he pulled out crops that were doing well. Not to eat, just to make sure
they just didn't do good.
Shit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He started drinking again, and he was stealing from everyone. His mom, his neighbors, like literally everyone again. And his mom was like, I'm actually gonna try to be a good mom for 1 second and try and help him. Mm-hmm. And she was like, so is there anything you want to be when you grow up? Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm gonna help you. Mm-hmm. And Carl was like, yes, actually, I want to be a priest. And she was like, yes, I can see you doing that. And got him accepted into a seminary.
Oh.
Yeah. So he actually did really well at first. He was like paying attention, learning, answering questions, kind of like he was at the school before he left.
Just faking it for a little bit.
I guess. I don't know what his intentions were with this. I don't know if he like actually, I don't know. And everyone loved him.
Maybe.
Except,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Maybe it was because like he saw Dr. Mann like in that high position.
And like nothing was happening to him.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So one priest was on to him. He said he just got like bad vibes from Carl, said he was evil. Carl was like, oh my God, what? No. And the priest started to challenge everything Carl did, like trying to get a rise out of him. Mm-hmm. And eventually that worked. And Carl lost his temper. They got in a huge fight. And from there on out, Carl was back to getting beat every day in this school.
So they beat too?
Yeah.
So they were abusing
Everyone
too?
beats in this.
Okay, so just assume.
This is a wild time to be alive. Because you're going to get beat, pretty much. So Carl's back to his old self, not listening, daily beatings. He is still stealing money and alcohol, but now he's starting to commit like home invasions. He stole another gun. I don't know anything about guns. I did see the names, but I was like, I'm not going to say them because I don't know what I'm talking about. One day, while the priest was beating him, he pulled that gun out and put it straight between his eyes and pulled the trigger. It did not fire. There were bullets in the gun, and he fully intended to shoot that priest, but it jammed. So he still hasn't murdered anyone at this point.
Wow, okay.
All of this horrendous shit is just, like, this is just his life leading up to it.
It seems like there's a lot of divine intervention in this story.
Yeah.
The pond, and then...
Yeah,
priest.
That's true. Yeah, the priest was, anyway. So again, authorities were never called because they didn't want anyone to know what was going on there. Mm-hmm. They basically kind of gave him an out. They were like kind of scared of him, I think, at this point. So they were like, yeah, so are there any other career paths that you would like to take in life? Like, are you sure this is the one? Because you can totally leave and go somewhere else if you want. So basically they kicked him out, but like in a nice way. And he was like, fuck you.
Yeah.
And left. Like, he was not having that anymore. When his mom found out, she wouldn't let him come home because she thought like I don't know if she found out he murdered someone or just that he like was kicked out, but she was like, no, like, you're not coming here.
Like, it's his same old behaviors again.
Yeah. Now Carl was homeless. and he had to figure out how to live on the streets. He did, I guess, like the train hopping was really popular back then, because that's a lot. This happens a lot in his story. He was actually adapting pretty well to this lifestyle until one night. He's 14 at this age, so just keep that in mind. He's like a baby. And this is like super brutal. He jumped onto a train, and there were 4 other homeless men on there. They were drinking whiskey, and they were like sharing it with Carl and acting like all nice, manipulation. Once they started getting buzzed, they started to talk about what was really going on. They basically told him, like, we're planning on raping you. And Carl was like, what? And fighting back, obviously, but he's 14, and these are like 4 men.
Like grown men.
So they ended up violently raping him, all 4 of them, and then threw him out of a moving train. Yes. He woke up the next morning on the ground covered in blood. This is when Carl himself became obsessed with sodomy. He would literally, like, he doesn't know anything else. Like, in his mind, I don't think he's ever seen, like, a relationship where someone didn't just, like,
violently
take it. Yeah, like, whatever they want, like, take it. There's never been consensual sex. It's always violence. And, yeah, like, to him, if you want something, you take it.
Mm-hmm.
In his mind, he needed to do this to weaker, smaller people, like we talked about before. And he started to travel strictly alone, because obviously he didn't trust anyone. I did read about one incident where he kind of joined like a little friend group in a tent city somewhere, but they violently raped him.
Stop it.
So after this, he was like, nope, I've tried to have friends and it didn't work, so I'm done. Now, everyone that he robbed or stole from, he also raped. So he started doing it. He was eventually arrested for larceny, and after this, he was sent to the Red Wing Training School. This was, as you imagined, I'm sure, not a good experience. It wasn't as bad as the reform school, but it's still pretty bad. He immediately started to rape and beat the younger boys there. There was a guard who hated Carl, and like it was like his goal to break him, like to break Carl. He would mess with him every day, and Carl was like, yeah, I want to murder him. So he found a board and ran up behind the guard one day and hit him in the back of the head. It didn't kill him, but apparently he did stop messing with Carl, so it registered success. Like, if I hurt them, they'll leave me alone.
Right.
He made a quick, like, little friendship while he was there. And according to Carl, this was, like, his first real friend in life. They were both 15, and they escaped together.
Okay.
He escapes. Listen, this man is an escape artist. He breaks in and out of prisons.
Into prisons?
There are instances where he broke into a prison to get someone else out, and then they escaped. So he broke in and went back out, but I mean, it's like an impressive amount of times. So this is the first one, and they kind of like ganged up and started robbing together. They really enjoyed robbing churches and then burning them down. They were at this for 4 months, and then Carl's friend was caught and sent to an adult prison. And Carl was like devastated over that. He did end up, I read something where he did see that guy again like years later when Carl was sent to the same prison. But he doesn't come back up. So Carl was like, I need to get out of here before I get caught, and he took off to Kansas. So Carl's also like a world traveler.
Mm-hmm.
So while he was there, he lied about his age and joined the army.
Okay.
So, and apparently he like heard the recruiter giving this like amazing speech, and Carl was like, yes, I want that.
That's how I'm going to get out of this.
Yeah. So he quickly found out that he could not take orders unless he was being beaten. So, like, that's how his mind works now. Like, you're not serious about giving me orders unless you're like physically harming me
right
at the same time. Literally, it was like 2 weeks into this, and he stole a bunch of uniforms and snuck off base to attempt to sell them. He was caught doing this, and his immediate supervisors, or whatever their title is, I don't know the military lingo, but they were like, okay, this is like small, it's not really a big deal, but we're gonna have to send it up the chain of command just to cover ourselves. Like, nothing's gonna happen. Like, they kept reassuring him nothing was gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, the Secretary of War for President Roosevelt was William Howard Taft, who was also ended up being the president. Right? Yes. Okay. Just want to make sure. It went all the way up to the chain to him, and instead of a slap on the wrist, which is what everyone thought he was going to get, he was like, yeah, I'm going to make an example out of him.
How did that end up all the way up there?
I don't know. I do not know, but it did. He was dishonorably discharged and thrown in Fort Leavenworth Prison.
What?
Which at the time was one of the worst prisons in the United States for stealing uniforms. So, of course, this was a surprise to him and everyone around him, because no one thought, like, that he's going to get sent to prison and like discharged from the military for this.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, then out of nowhere, he got that news. His sentence, 7 years.
This is what I'm talking about. That divine intervention. Like, how does a report like that get all the way up there?
Yeah. Oh, he gets back at him. Don't worry.
Oh my God.
Yes. So,
does he ever tell them how old he is?
I don't know. I do not know. But I guess back then you just believed everyone.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, this kid looks like he could. But I will say, though, he is... I listened to another podcast that said at this age, he could have passed for being older because he's like a big dude and like buff, and he had a receding hairline already. So apparently they thought he's older. I don't know. He was tortured, beaten, and raped while he was in this prison. He gained respect from other inmates because he would fight back to the guards when they would do stuff. When he would fight back, though, the guards would put him in a straitjacket and then tighten it so much that he would lose consciousness, like straight up pass out. There was a point when they were doing this to him every single day. And after about a year...
A year?
Yeah.
He does not break.
He literally does not. He, all the way until the end. I think that's what, like, really shocked me about him. After about a year, he was, like, super buff. Like, bodybuilder, which we see a lot still, but apparently he was, like, a big dude. And at this point in life, he's 17 at this point, remember? It's here where he just gets so angry and wants to destroy everything in his path. Like, his main mission in life now is revenge. That's all he wants, which I understand.
What else did you have at this point?
I mean, yeah. He was in prison until 1910, and he said in his biography something like, this isn't a direct quote, but it was like along the lines of this: I was pretty bad before I went to prison, but whatever good was left in me was beaten out of me. So he's back out, and he served his full sentence, and he's back out train hopping. So he's 19 at this time of the story. Yes. So again, like, his ultimate goal is revenge. So he's out robbing, beating, and raping everyone. All of his victims are male. So, and there's a lot of speculation. I don't think he ever admitted it, but there's a lot of speculation that he was gay. But, like, back then, for one, he didn't even know what that was. It does come back up in the end, and we'll talk more about it, but there was a lot of speculation, like, not at that time, but, like, after he passed away and people started hearing his story.
Right.
So he did have one female victim, like, at this time, that he ended up raping on a train, but he caught he caught gonorrhea. So from there on out, he stuck to men because, like, in his mind, women were unclean. Like, that was his experience with it. He was arrested again for stealing, did a little bit of time, got out, continued to rob churches, just, like, not changing. Like, this is all he knows.
Mm-hmm.
He did, however, get a job.
Okay.
He has a few jobs throughout his life. Like, he actually wanted to work, I think. He gained employment at the Kansas State Fair. He became part of Colonel Dickey's Wild West show.
Oh.
He was like a bodyguard.
Okay.
So he was like this huge buff dude, and like they wanted him to keep the other people in line.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he was super, super good at it.
Mm-hmm. I imagined he would be good at that.
Until he was fired.
Oh.
Apparently, a horse bumped into him, and he punched it in the face. And they were like, yeah, we really don't like people who abuse animals, so you're going to have to go.
You punch horses in the face.
Yeah, and there's a quote that I read at the very end, and it was like, basically saying the only thing he's sorry for is hurting the few animals that he did, because he was supposedly this big animal lover.
Mm-hmm.
So he was so pissed, like enraged about this, he had to get revenge. Like, you don't mess with Carl without consequences.
No, even horses. I mean, you just ran into him.
Just punched a horse right in the face. And he's like a big that probably really injured that horse.
It probably did.
So he waited until it got dark, and he snuck on their train, because they were like a traveling circus. I don't know. Yeah, pretty much. And they got to their next city, and they ended up setting up. And at night, when everyone went to bed, Carl started a fire in the food tent. And the horses literally ran around the campsite on fire, which set everything else on fire.
Oh my God.
Not one animal survived, and all of their stuff was destroyed. Like, it had to shut down. Mm-hmm. Like, the whole company was done. It was done. So, like, this is what happens when you piss Carl off. He then decides he's going to go to Illinois. At this time, the railroad workers were striking. And when strikes are going on, I guess, I didn't know, you might have known this, but there are two different kinds of people. Scabs, which are the people who, like, come in and work for the same wage.
Mm-hmm.
And blacklegs, who were, like, hired to literally beat up the strikers.
Okay.
Until they basically gave up.
Oh, no, I didn't know about that. I didn't know they would do that.
So, naturally, Carl was like, this is my dream job.
Yeah.
And was hired. And he did very well, because he was getting paid to beat people.
Mm-hmm.
He still hasn't murdered anyone. So,
has he hit 21 yet?
At this point, I was like, how is he not? Like, this is just his life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how has he not murdered anyone? So, but I don't know if this is still a thing, but I did a quick Google search. And it wasn't like a super in-depth one, but apparently back then, in the homeless community, there's something called a yeg.
What's that?
It's when an older man somehow, like, gets a teen boy.
Okay.
And that boy is basically their sex slave and their crime partner.
Okay.
They would trade them with other homeless men, like trade the boys and stuff. And most of the time they got them by abducting them. And they would keep them and kind of like teach them their ways until those boys were old enough to do that themselves, to get
like
their
generational
own. Yeah.
Yins?
Yins. Yegs.
Yegs? Oh, I don't know where I got yin.
I thought you were saying yin, like how they do it in like Harlan County, Kentucky. Like, I love yins.
Yeah,
that's what I thought you were just doing.
No, so it's yang?
Yeg.
Yeg. So the generational yeg.
Yeg. So Carl bought one.
He bought one?
He bought one. A young boy, and he was described to be curly-haired, blue-eyed, rosy-cheeked fat boy. They were really loving.
They were.
Back in the day. So they were out stealing things, Carl and this boy, and they got arrested. And they were forced to work on like a road crew together. He started to use a bunch of like aliases at this time too. So when he was arrested, he gave the name Jeff Davis. And, like, Carl gets away with stuff for his whole life, which really isn't that long, but it's because, like, they couldn't track that back in the day.
Right.
Like, you don't have a paper trail. You don't. So, and he's always switching up his names and his looks.
Really?
Like, even, like, in his mugshots, he looks different in a lot of them.
Also, can we talk about that poor boy, too?
Yeah.
That got stuck on the same campus him?
Yeah. Literally.
How awful would that be?
It's like so much happens in the story. You don't just, like, all of it doesn't soak in at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing, like, a brief overview of it. So it's, yeah, that is crazy. This is like the weirdest thing ever. So when it came time for Carl to be released, the guard that was over the work crew refused to release him because he was too good of a worker. So
he did too well in jail?
Yeah. And the guy was like, "You're not leaving because I need you."
Like the opposite of good time.
So Carl tried to escape. He was caught, which didn't stop him in the future. Mm-hmm. But they punished him by using something called the snorting pole. Pole? I can't talk today.
Snorting pole.
This is a 12-foot pole that is like stuck in the ground like a flagpole. And there's a rope that runs up through it. And at the top, it's like looped like handcuffs. They would like put the person's hands in the handcuffs and pull them up to where their feet were off the ground.
Oh.
And they were naked while this was happening and whipped. This was Carl's punishment, and they did this for an hour. So your, like, shoulders are holding your entire body. It's crazy. The guards became instantly terrified because Carl seemed unbothered by this torture. Like, almost annoyed that it was happening. Like, can you just get done with this, please? And they were so afraid of him, they cut him down and released him immediately. Because they were like, no one's ever just taken this. And
like, he's definitely going to kill us after this.
Yeah. So, once released, he goes to Oregon, and he continues his normal Carl ways, just like robbing, beating, and raping people. He stole a yacht at one point. He steals boats all the time. This is also like his thing. Just super cash, like a yacht. And then he crashed it and had to swim back to shore.
At the same spot that he stole it?
I don't know.
Okay, sorry.
Don't know. He like sailed. Mm-hmm. I don't know the right term, but he boated. He like just traveled everywhere. Mm-hmm. Like he used these to
get around.
Run. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He would randomly like bury his stolen items around the country in different locations, and then he would brag about it, which we know will eventually get you caught.
Mm-hmm.
He was arrested this time under the name Jeff Baldwin, and they gave him a deal. They said, if you tell us where the stolen items are hidden, you'll get like a super small sentence. Mm-hmm. Like he was imagining like a few months or mm-hmm. something. So he told them where everything was. Come to find out, the judge lied to him.
Oh.
He got another 7 years. Bitch, please get ready for this next part. This is the most shocking thing I've ever heard in my life. I'm going to end it after this. When he got to prison, he was so angry, he literally bent the bars with his bare hands. Just
ripped it right open?
When I heard that, I was like, this can't. That's how mad he was. Then he blocked off all of the exits and beat the shit out of all the guards. Like, you aren't going to stop Carl.
No.
Like, he will just rip a house down with his bare hands. So, and the prisoners were all watching him like, what is happening? I immediately go to, what's that movie where the guy has all the personalities? It's a really good movie.
21... No?
Patricia, the one who goes by Patricia.
I know, I can't remember what it's called either. I'm trying to think of it too.
Anyway, at the end.
Split.
Oh
there
my God,
we go. Sorry,
it
just hit. Okay.
at the very end, this is what I picture as Carl. The very end, when he like turns into an animal or whatever he does at the end of that movie, that's what I imagine Carl being like. The animal one. So, anyway, I'm going to end it right there.
Is Carl just bending bars and
Carl
being
just
rampage,
ripping the bars open with his bare hands. And yeah, he still hasn't.
He hasn't even killed anybody yet.
He has not murdered anyone. So, yeah. Hopefully, don't Google it.
Don't Google it.
Don't go and try and figure this out before next week, because it does get crazy.
It's already crazy.
It's almost hard to keep up with the second part, because he's just, every day he's like in a different location doing something else. So, yes, I'm going to finish it here.
Okay.
And we will be back next week with the conclusion. Hopefully, if I can get it all in one. My research was like 20 pages typed, so no big deal. So, yeah, hop on over and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, Twitter. Send us an email, murderwordspodcast@gmail.com. And we will talk to you soon.
Bye.